Chapter 4. A Slave Queen is Born. Lalia's scavenging was successful as she was able to find them something to eat without resorting to the traps planted by the witches. She instructed Kubra to leave the responsibility of searching for food to her, as only she could tell them apart. During her scavenge, just like she suspected, she noticed that the witches had planted similar plants far outside of the cave just so they can catch them. They stayed in the cave for a very long time, hiding away from the witches and any other dangers that might be lurking in the forest. The witches' fear of Priest Kunja was not unfounded after all. As the days and nights passed by and the full moon drawing closer, the witches got even more desperate because they were getting weaker. They had given up on capturing the traitor Lalia and the wretched slave girl by now, and all they wanted was a sacrifice befitting of the full moon. One day, as they were on a hunt for the perfect sacrifice, they came across Kunja, who was also on a hunt for them and their kind. Even though they fought fiercely, they were no match for the powerful priest, who slayed them all. This pleased Kunja greatly, as he thought he had finally succeeded in slaying and ending the witches' cult. As soon as the witches were killed, all their spells died with them. Lalia noticed that all the magical plants sowed by the witches in and around the cave had all disappeared. She knew then that this could only mean that they had perished at the hand of Kunja. She also knew that the only way she could be saved from the same fate was if she refrained from hunting humans and from making any human sacrifices. This was not easy for her. She had been living as a witch for too long now. But she was determined to stay alive for as long as she could to protect Kubra and her baby. For this reason, she religiously stuck to eating only cooked food by Kubra, and with time it became easier. In the months to come, they continued to hide in the cave. They lived there until it was closer to the time for Kubra to put to bed. One day, certain that Kubra's baby can arrive at any point, Lalia set out into the forest in search of supplies to prepare them for her. She left Kubra like she always did, in safety of the cave. Kubra had grown restless and was nurturing an increasing frustration over the fact that she could not leave the cave. All she did was cook and clean all day long, all the while nestled in the confines of the cave. Therefore, while Lalia was out on this day, she decided to quickly sneak out of the cave for a long-anticipated walk outside the cave. As she walked around, she realized that the forest did not really change much from the last time she was out in it. It was still very scary, and she could hear the odd petrifying screams as she walked on. She also came a few scary creatures, but by now she had grown accustomed to the sights and sound of the forbidden forest, and she carried on without pause. They also did not seem to want to bother her, and she suspected that they were probably deterred by Akwala, the spirit she was told is protecting her baby. She was so lost in her own reverie and enjoying her venture out of the cave that she did not see Lalia rush towards her until she was violently grabbed and dragged hurriedly into the cave. This caused such a shock to run through her that she could feel her water break. Everything was happening so fast that she was struggling to make sense of her situation. As she struggled to gather her thoughts, she heard Lalia scream, "We must leave now." The witch was pulling at her arm so hard by now that Kubra winced. "We must get out of here immediately. The priest saw me pass by and he will be here in no time," Lalia explained, rousing fear in the already flustered Kubra. They packed whatever they could get their hands on and set out, running out of the cave and into the forest as fast as they could. As they ran, Kubra's labor pains were increasing with intensity and frequency. This got Lalia very worried, as not too far from them she had noticed the flames of a fierce fire. She knew that this was no ordinary fire. It was started by Kunja the priest. It was a fire that is meant to vanquish all supernatural beings. When Priest Kunja saw Lalia earlier, he got outrageously upset as he believed that all this while he had gotten rid of all the witches in the Forbidden Forest. Therefore, he spared no time in hunting Lalia down. Lalia knew she was not powerful enough to fight this kind of magic, but she was resigned to dying if it meant getting the poor girl to safety. Kubra realized the risk that Lalia is taking and could not bear the thought of losing her companion. She therefore urged her to stay back and reassure her that she can get herself to safety. Lalia, knowing what she was trying to do, quickly dismissed her pleas, saying, "We are in this together. I am not allowing you out of my sight for 1 second." "This fire will kill you," Kubra begged, but Lalia helped her find a place in the wood for her to lay as she struggled to breathe. The smoke from the fire had spread all over the forest by now, and it was making Lalia weaker with every passing moment. Despite her obvious pain, she was more worried about Kubra and the child on the way. "Now let me help you," she told Kubra, coughing. Kubra was now in the deepest throes of labor pains and was screaming at the top of her lungs as she struggled to usher her child into the world. By the time the baby was delivered, both mother and child were unconscious from the incredible pain. Lalia picked up the baby and held her close. It was as cold as a stone. Lalia stared at her, willing her to breathe. She started shaking the baby almost violently, but there was still no movement. Not even a tiny cry from the baby. And this only made Lalia feel heartbroken. Not giving up, she decided to go deeper into the woods to shield the baby from the terrible smoke. Perhaps that is why she's not moving or crying, she thought to herself as she got the baby to safety. She silently promised Kubra that she would be back to save her. Unfortunately, as she hurriedly rustled through the woods holding the baby close to her chest to keep her warm, she heard Kunja announce his presence from a distance. This sent such fear through her that she almost dropped the baby. She quickly looked around for anywhere she could lay the baby as she left to save her mother. As she turned to leave, the baby started crying. The sound of the crying infant brought tears to Lalia's eyes. She suddenly felt so much emotions that she immediately ran back to check on her. She gasped at the baby's beauty as she looked up at her. Once she had quickly reassured herself that the baby was safe, she set back on her journey to Kubra. As she reached a rush of bushes just before the place she left the unconscious Kubra, she saw Kunja and some of his shrine guards. She peered through the tall grasses and saw that Kubra still lay at the same spot, but she was now surrounded by some of the priest's guards. One of them seemed to be checking on the slave as if to ascertain if she was alive. The priest barked orders at his guards to carry Kubra away. By this time, Kubra had woken up and was sobbing incessantly, devastated at her captivity. "Where is the witch?" Kunja furiously asked as Kubra cried. "My baby! My baby! She took my baby!" Kubra cried out, making the priest believe that she was a victim from their kingdom. As she was being carried, she caught a glimpse of Lalia, who was helplessly looking on as she was being carried away. She immediately looked away, not wanting to alert the priest or his guards to Lalia's presence.